Alvin Bragg's soft on crime policies, Democrat New York City Councilman Robert Holden will be one of the GOP's top witnesses. He tells Fox News Digital that Bragg is to blame for New York City's lawlessness, saying that he is refusing to prosecute things like resisting arrest and prostitution. Former bodega worker Jose Alba also is expected to testify. He testified last summer. He is expected to testify, but last summer he was charged with murder after stabbing a man in self-defense at his store. Bragg had sent Alba to Rikers Island, but the charge was eventually dropped after public outcry. Joining me now is Louisiana Congressman, member of the House Judiciary Committee, Armed Services Committee, and Select Subcommittee on Weaponization of Federal Government, Congressman Mike Johnson. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks for being here. What are you expecting from this hearing today? What do you want to do?
Well, we want to give the victims of crime in Manhattan an opportunity to share their stories. On the House Judiciary Committee, this is squarely within our jurisdiction. We're deeply concerned about the rise in crime in this area. You know, if a few radical politicians like Alvin Bragg can destroy a once great American city, the people of this country need to understand it can happen in their hometown as well. And so this is something that I think many millions of Americans are deeply concerned about.
Yeah, but your colleagues on the left are pushing back on you. Democrat Congressman Jerry Nadler is downplaying it all. He told the New York Post that Republican claims about the Big Apple crime rates are essentially fraudulent. That's what he used, that word, fraudulent. The Democrats are bringing New York Congressman Dan Goldman to defend Alvin Bragg during the hearing. Goldman, a former Trump impeachment lawyer, endorsed Bragg for DA and supported the D.C. crime bill. Your thoughts?
Yeah, we don't envy him for having to defend Alvin Bragg today. Look, the stats are clear. We have an epidemic of violent crime here, and the reason is because of the soft on crime policies of this district attorney. From day one, he issued this infamous now policy memo where he instructed his assistant prosecutors basically to let criminals roam free. And so the obvious and logical effects of that are now being felt around the city. According to the NYPD's own statistics, we had major crimes rise by over 23% in just 1 year. This is completely foreseeable, but they do this in the name of things like restorative justice and equity. And hey, if you're listening at home and you hear your local prosecutor use those terms, you might need to elect a new one. It's going to lead to terrible consequences for everybody.
Well, I mean, do you think that the people understand this? Because the media doesn't even cover it, Congressman. You know that. And now we've got C-SPAN cameras not going to be there. They basically declined to air the hearing on C-SPAN. They claim they do not have the resources. C-SPAN also refused to cover the Judiciary Committee field hearing to the border, remember? That was back in February, Congressman.
Yeah, exactly. And it shows their bias. We called them out. And I think, Maria, the late breaking news is C-SPAN is actually going to cover the hearing today. But we had to force them to do that. And it just goes to show you the bias that we're working against every single day. They don't want the American people to see what is happening. They don't want them to hear from these victims. But thankfully today we're going to give them that opportunity. And some of these stories are just tragic. We have to turn this around. Listen, New York Times published over the weekend that just one statistic, shoplifting crimes. Over one third of the shoplifting crimes in New York City last year involved just 327 people. Collectively, they were arrested over 6,000 times. They cannot say that they're not turning criminals loose. And of course, that leads to greater and greater and more violent crime. And that's what the people of this city are experiencing. We've got to get on top of this.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because Jim Jordan laid it all out. He joined me on Friday on Maria Bartiromo's Wall Street. Here's what the chairman of the committee said. Watch.
We want to hear from the victims, the families, the people in Manhattan, the people in New York who've been impacted by this surge in crime that has happened because you have DAs who are more focused on coddling criminals than they are putting them behind bars and making sure families and individuals and communities and business owners are impacted by the surge in crime we have seen because of those policies.
So, I mean, are you really going to be able to change anything, Congressman? I understand what Jim Jordan is saying there, but you're not going to change D.A. Bragg's policies.
Well, no, but we're going to put pressure on him and hopefully change the trajectory of what the residents of this city are having to face. Obviously, elections have consequences. There are the elections of local DAs around the country, but people need to be aware that if they're advancing these kinds of ideas, these radical progressive ideologies, it's going to lead to terrible consequences. The only thing higher than the violent crime rate, and the crime rate in New York City right now, is the rate of U-Haul rentals and reservations of people moving out of this city. And they're going to red states in places like Florida and Texas, Tennessee, where they can have a better quality of life and they don't have to look over their shoulder just from walking down the street going to the drugstore. And so this has real world consequences for people, and you're going to hear some of these victims tell their tragic stories today, and hopefully that has an effect on public opinion.
What else are you working on the Select Committee on Weaponization? I mean, we're going to hear from Elon Musk tonight. He's on Tucker Carlson, and he goes through how all of these government agencies were basically in bed with Twitter and telling Twitter what to suppress, what to amplify lies, suppress truth. How are we going to change this weaponization of government?
Yeah, it's a terrible problem, Maria. It's such a target-rich environment for us in terms of investigating all of this scandalous stuff that it's hard for us to focus sometimes. But what's happened is over the last couple of years in particular, many of the federal agencies that were designed and protected, designed to serve and protect the American people have been used against them. And we know, for example, with the big tech platforms, as we know, FBI whistleblowers have come forward. We have the documents. We know that in the last two election cycles over the last couple of years, basically, Twitter, prior to Elon Musk taking it over, was a subsidiary of the FBI. They were meeting regularly with them and the other big tech platforms to censor and silence conservatives and even candidates whose messages they didn't favor. And so it's a serious concern. It's a blatant violation of people's First Amendment rights to free speech, and they're tilting the scale of the public square, the free marketplace of ideas. And that has dangerous consequences in a republic, in a government, in a system, in a society like ours.
Yeah, for sure. Congressman, it's good to see you. We'll be watching all of that. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Mike Johnson is in New York this morning, as are several GOPers. Coming up, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy headed to the big city today. He's going to the New York Stock Exchange to talk about the economy and raising the debt ceiling. We'll preview what the speaker has to say when we come right back. Stay with us.